All right, let's get to some viewer comments. I actually thought I would do something different this time just because this one video I made got so many good comments and questions. It actually did pretty well, this video. It's called, What the Hell is the I Am Sense? So if you haven't checked it out, check it out. But I'm going to read some comments that are about the I Am Sense and sort of peripheral things, but I think they're just some good talking points. So let's get busy. This one's from Kat. It says, "Hi, Angelo. Just recently started reading your book. Question for you. How does the perspective of we are all gods in amnesia, and that's what we really or what we are really waking up to, differ from shifting one's perspective to one of non-duality?" Okay, if you consider non-duality or awakening or anything a perspective, like a paradigm or a way of looking at the world, that's more what I would call like pop spirituality. It's not an actual transformation. So what we're talking about is transformative. It has to be transformative. It has to be a fundamental change in your experience of yourself. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about awakening, and certainly non-duality. I won't go into the details of the difference between the two. I've talked about it many times. Non-duality, the way I speak about it, being a specific perceptual shift that happens after awakening. But so I just want to be clear that it's not about, is it this perspective versus that perspective, or I used to hold that perspective, how do I shift to a non-duality perspective? It's not about perspectives. So what I would say to most directly answer your question is there something in you right now that feels like it can carry you beyond the dimension of what you take yourself to be right now? I mean, like what you've always just considered that you are, who you've always considered that you are, not just the spiritual side of you either, by the way. I mean, the mundane side of you, the internal world, the place you are when you go inside and think about things and imagine how your life is and plan things and contemplate, and even the deeper like emotional stuff, the fears, the existential fears that maybe got buried at some point in your life, like all those things, all of that is just part of your total experience of what you take yourself to be in the way I'm speaking about it. So can you turn inward and just access something that it's like a bridge? It almost carries you, it does, carries you beyond somehow, or even before, even something that was there, that is here, but was there clearly before you started taking yourself to be the one living the life you're living right now, including any suffering that may be happening, any feeling of things are off or something's not right, or just a kind of feeling of discord in life, such that you may need a spiritual paradigm to make yourself feel better, for instance. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about like kind of an inward turning into like that deepest part of yourself. And it's not, if you're labeling it, is it non-duality, or is it God in disguise, or is it Advaita Vedanta, or is it Buddhism, or is it Zen? That's not what I'm talking about, because those are thoughts. Those are paradigms, beliefs, thoughts. They may have more to them than just one thought. They may be like kind of whole ways of looking at the world and associated thoughts and even behaviors and relationships and so forth. All that can be true. It's just not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something fundamental to that even. That's that inward turning or that backward step. Sometimes this comes to you. I really love when I talk about, what really starts to happen when you start to wake up. It's not something you choose so much in the way you could choose a paradigm. Like, I ascribe to this, now I ascribe to that. It's something that sneaks up on you. I love the statement in the Bible and the Gospels, the kingdom of heaven is like a thief that sneaks in the night. It's just like that. It's like it just sneaks up on you in the way you can't imagine. But you can query into it. You can inquire. That's what inquiry is. You can become curious about the nature of your own suffering, or the nature of feeling just off somehow in life, or something's just not quite right. Or maybe just through curiosity. Well, what is the source of that curiosity, that spiritual yearning, that yearning for some kind of wholeness or something that's not fractured, right? Why do we yearn for wholeness? Why do we yearn for God? Because we feel small, separate, isolated. That's suffering. So maybe it's more like, okay, what is that curiosity? What is its source? Can you source the curiosity right now? Can you go right in and just touch into that curiosity? And if you do that enough times, it turns out, or you listen to these kinds of pointers, these kinds of talks, or go to retreats and so forth, it turns out it makes you, as Adyashanti might say, grace prone. It sort of tills the soil and fertilizes the soil and so forth, such that that thief that sneaks in the night somehow has access. I don't know. Maybe it's like leaving your doors and windows open. Okay. I think I beat that one to death, but thank you. It was a good question. This one's from Kadsveta Tarot. It says, I do get confused and sometimes feel that I'm missing something when listening to non-dual speakers or during retreats. I understand that there are human experiences such as out-of-body experiences or even experiences of oneness, which in my case have lasted for quite a while. But it doesn't feel like the thing everyone seems to be looking for, because it didn't last and didn't remain. Yeah. Again, as I mentioned in the first one, it's really about some kind of transformational process. It's not an experience. Experiences come and go, and I had those types of experiences you're talking about before awakening. And when the shift of awakening happened, I suppose it had some flavors of those experiences, but it's so much more fundamental. It's not bigger in some mystical way or it's not a bigger experience, I guess is what I want to say. Because one thing that consistently surprises people when they have a shift is they're like, oh, it's not this big explosion of something I thought it would be, because they were imagining an experience. The you that's imagining the experience is itself an experience. That's what you see through. And you realize like, oh my God, this whole sense of me imagining my life all the time, having a relationship with my own imagined life, that whole thing was like a thought. That whole thing was not, or I'll just say, that whole thing was not what I am. That whole thing was not the essence of being, the experience of being. There is an experience of being that is available that is so much more fundamental than that. And you just kind of fall back into it somehow. Hopefully that's helpful. It's okay. There's a little more to the question. It says, regarding the I am sense, I experience it as what I tend to call, quote, stay in presence as presence, end quote. It has been recognized throughout my life, and as I grew older, it became obscured by thoughts. But as soon as the mind is calm, it reveals itself again. The only thing I can do is, so to say, marinate in it and rest in it. In that way, it becomes stronger than identity that can obscure it, than the identity that can obscure it. Okay, that sounds good to me. Maybe you have had a shift at some point, or maybe you're just naturally clear on this aspect of realization. At this point, even thoughts and all experiences are recognized as appearing on the surface of this I am sense. It is very difficult to describe something that doesn't have a definitive name or form. Good. So I think you're good, but let me see what you're confused about. It says, I get confused when I am asked whether this presence remains even during sleep, because this is a question I cannot answer. Yeah, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. I don't use that as a litmus test. It comes from one of the Upanishads, but it's not something I'm concerned with. The idea of transcendent consciousness being clear in waking, dreaming, and sleeping states, essentially. I wouldn't worry about that so much. Yeah. And when you say, like, in this sense, what I call I am cannot be what everyone else is looking for or aiming for, I would definitely not make the assumption that everyone else is doing anything specific. This is maybe your biggest challenge here, really. The thing I want to challenge with you is, you have an idea that there's a something called everyone else, and that everyone else does the same thing, and they're all looking for the same. Trust me, read all the comments on this video. There are people who don't have an I am sense and never understood it, never had it. There are other people who have awakenings, and it is the I am sense, and it's very obvious to them. There are people who have everything in between, and there are people who don't give a shit about the I am sense. They don't meditate that way. They don't think about it that way. If you kind of grew up with Ramana or maybe Nisargadatta or Advaita Vedanta, then it's a bigger deal often. In Buddhism, they don't talk about the I am sense. Probably to a fault, actually. But anyway, doesn't matter. So yeah, don't make the assumption that everyone is doing any specific thing or looking for the same thing and you're not that one. That's not an insight issue. That's a psychology issue. And I don't mean you have a mental illness. I mean, it's everybody's psychology. We have this sense of FOMO, missing out. A lot of this stuff comes down to psychology, not insight. And we get hung up on that stuff. Like, even if everyone is looking for this thing called the I am sense, or talking about this thing called the I am sense, and you're not clear on it, or whatever it is, even if that's true, who cares? That's not your experience. And your experience is the only thing that's going to clarify realization. That's the only thing. And I mean your experience right now, not your nominalized experience, not your summarized experience. Your experience right now is the only thing that matters. That's it. I think you're in a good place. Don't leverage your doubt with the idea of everyone else, because it's just a thought. Moving target. Everyone's confused when they believe their thoughts, and when people don't believe their thoughts, the confusion ends. That's true of everyone. Doesn't matter what their thoughts are about. The content doesn't matter. Nice. Good question. That actually turned out to be good. I'm glad we read the whole thing. This one's from Mayploy. The I am, as well as the big S self thing, never made sense to me. My first reaction was, maybe there is a self or a sense of I am, or maybe there isn't, but what difference does it make? Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. But then when I try to focus solely on pure awareness, I keep hitting this wall where there is always a sense of a person that is aware. Check out my video called The Awareness Trap. That might be very helpful. And or do any of the contemplations in the non-duality playlist. Yes, good comment. This one's from Adult Swim Bump. It says, great timing. I was just wondering about this because of course I am. It's obvious that I exist. But I don't think my I am is the same as the I am of awake beings. I don't feel free, but I am deeply unhappy. What I would say is this first part when you say, of course I am. Oh no, you said, it's obvious that I exist. Why? When you say it's obvious that you exist, I don't care if you do or not, but I would suggest if you want to listen to what I'm saying, look for why it is that you're so certain of that, because you sound certain of it. It's obvious that I exist. Great. How do you know? What are you referencing specifically? Is it a sense? Is it a sensation? Like that? Like that's a sensation, pinching your skin, or the feeling of your breath moving in your body? Is it a sensation? Is it something you're seeing? The only way you're going to see it probably is look in the mirror. Is that what confirms that I exist? Is it a belief that says, well, yeah, I exist. I'm this age and I have this body. Or is it the thought that says, I can see my body, I can see a body, so I exist? What is it you're referencing that makes you really believe you exist? And don't think about it as much as really look with precision. That's a good process here, in my opinion, if you want to. If not, don't worry about it. This one's from Cogirius. That was very crucial. Wish I had this message much earlier. That would have saved a lot of confusion. Thank you. What about awareness? Wish you would make a similar video where you react to others' uses and how you have blah, blah, blah. Okay. Again, check out the video, The Awareness Trap. The way you probably see that I don't use awareness teachings in the way a lot of people do at all. I don't even use the word very often. And there's a reason for it. I prefer awakening for the first shift, which is, it's kind of like waking up to the non-dual nature of consciousness itself. That's not non-duality. And then the deeper insights, non-dual specifically, is the direct experience of not two in what we would call the physical world. And then there's deeper aspects of non-duality and anatta. So I kind of look at it in terms of those things. I don't talk about awareness as some kind of, because it's very easy to reify it as a background or a substratum, and people do it all the time. They literally say that. It is the substratum of all experience. But then, as you said, right, it gets confusing pretty quick. All right. This one's James Conte. Is the I am sense basically just thinking that I am the body? No, that's definitely not it. It's a starting place though, right? It's like if we do self-inquiry and we say, well, why do you know you are? Like I asked this previous person, how do you know who or what you are? Well, usually it starts out, well, I know I'm 35 years old and I'm female and I have, 2 children and I came from this town and, I like this kind of, I don't know, environment, and these things are my dislikes, and right, you'll think of all these thoughts first, right? Or you'll recognize and reference thoughts that tell you things about yourself, and then tell other people things about yourself. But pretty quickly you can realize, like, oh, if I was from a different town, would I stop being me? That doesn't make sense. If I didn't have kids, would I stop being me before I had children, before I was this age? Even if you really take it to the extreme, before I was self-aware, before I knew I was an I, which happened at 18 months old, were you not there? That's why questions can be really helpful, like, what was your face before your parents were born, and these kinds of things. What was your original face? Because it orients your attention to something that is in the relative back before you became a someone, and in the absolute directly into timelessness. Like, it does both simultaneously, that kind of questioning. So that's why these koans can be really powerful, which is a different approach than I am and self-inquiry. This is from Bacchus. The I am is a thought, okay? But so may be the so-called final position. Oh, that's for sure a thought. When I went through what I experienced as realizations, I never had a phase of I am everything. Not everybody does. I simply couldn't find a me anywhere. That's good. That would be called the first fetter. First fetter breaking. Yeah. That's not the same as anatta. I want to be really clear on this. This is not the same as no self-realization, or what I would call maybe eighth fetter. For a while, I thought I must be what many call the absolute, not conscious. The absolute, again, is a thought, of course, and so is the relative, and so is anything you can structure in language. It's a thought. However, some things point to things that are not thoughts. The absolute is kind of in between, because it points to, it's an antidote. To divide reality into absolute and relative has value to the deconstructing ego. But at some point, it's obviously realized that there's no absolute, like, floating out in space somewhere, and there's no relative in some physical, absolute materialistic form here either. Those are both extreme views, and they're both opinions and thoughts, right? Okay. So that's the thing about absolute. But something like a potential for manifestation, a little new agey maybe, but that didn't last long. Good. It became clear that it's not something that can actually be realized in experience. I don't know if I agree with that. And that life doesn't, it's something that can't be cognized in experience. It's something that can't be defined by words. It's something that can't be encapsulated by thought and concept and language. It's not even something that can be reflected on directly, ultimately. But I wouldn't say it's not something that can be realized, because it certainly can. Well, realization can be realized. Truth can be realized. And that life doesn't require any kind of background. True. So for me, the final position is simply this. What is as it is. I like that. You can call it real or illusion. I like that. It doesn't make any difference, of course. I agree. I don't remember existing before I was born. I don't know if anything remains after death. I don't even know who I am. And that's perfectly fine, because the desire to find answers has completely fallen away. That's good, although I will caution anyone listening to this that we can misconstrue this message that is very Neo-Advaita of, like, when the seeking stops, that's it. Like, right, spiritual seeking is the problem, or something like that. That's a total misperception, largely. Doesn't mean that seeking doesn't stop. Certainly seeking through thought, belief in future, belief in separate doership and agency based on duality, of course that has to stop, because that's all thought-based. It will stop. But the instinct to clarify insight doesn't have to stop. And sometimes people really misconstrue that, and for various reasons. And most of them are not because it's too obscure. Sometimes it is, or because it's, you haven't found the right guru or read the right text. A lot of people criticize in those ways. That's not what I'm talking about. It's psychological a lot of times. There's often like existential fears, like, floating around, and these reasons that we hold onto sort of identity structures, even though we see through identity. This is what I mean by the difference between first fetter and eighth fetter, like the difference between seeing that there's no self and being absolutely convinced that there is no self you're going to find. That's not the same as like the end of selfing. That's not the same as the end of reifying any kind of identity structure. So I want to be clear on that. I don't know where this person is on it, but I just want to be clear because this person has a lot of clarity and they're talking in precise ways, but I want to be precise myself and not confuse anybody because there's a lot of confusing stuff out there. Looking back, the whole seeking process feels somewhat pointless. See, I don't agree with that. Again, that's very Neo-Advaita. Like it's pointless to seek. And yet the people who speak that way, starting with Tony Parsons and Jim Newman and on and on and on, all those people were seekers for years. And then a shift clarified things, right? So to say that there is no causality there is to speak out of your, it's to speak out of your depth. Like, how can you know that? Just as you said it before, do you know what happens before birth and after death? But logically speaking, without having to throw out the relative mind we have to pay attention to patterns, it sure would seem like people who work hard, seek, inquire, meditate with the intention for insight and for awakening and surrender and do the work and do emotion work and all this, they have fruitions. And one fruition is this fruition of non-doership, which you're talking about. So I've said this before in other videos. I think Neo-Advaita very much overemphasizes non-doership. In fact, it's almost like that's all it points to. It doesn't really point to the non-dual aspect, strangely, even though Advaita should mean non-dual. But the sort of luminous non-dual aspects are often just totally left out. So as I read this, I don't know if these insights have dawned for you or not. But there could be more, and that'd be great. You don't have to seek for it. It's not a seeking thing. It's a reverence for the brilliance of non-dual experience that's just here. It's beautiful. It's amazing, and it comes with its own curiosity. You don't have to try to find something. We already know there's no one to find it. We know that, right? There's no one apart. There's no future in which anything's going to be found, and yet this can certainly clarify itself, just like it can from the point of being not a spiritual seeker, but a seeker in every other way, of every other point of life, and then becoming a spiritual seeker and narrowing that seeking energy, that yearning for truth down to a fine point, whether it's one-pointed or self-inquiry, and then it swallows its own tail. That is the process. But it's funny when you go through that process and they'll look back and go, oh, it was all pointless. There was no point in doing it. Oh, okay. Well, how do you know that? It would all evidence is to the contrary, is what I would say to that. So I'm not trying to pick on this person so much. They're just talking about their experience, but they have clarity and they're making specific points. I just wanted to talk about them. Pain and the full range of emotions are still here. Good. But they feel much more fluid and natural. Awesome. My mind became quiet. There was a whole lot of noise before. Anyway, my point is that Nisargadatta spoke a lot about the absolute, which makes sense with, he had some very interesting ways of speaking, by the way. He would talk about the absolute and or your true nature as rock solid sometimes. I thought that was so fascinating. He's like, it's solid as rock. Really interesting to me. I think I suspect he's pointing to like the luminous aspects instead of just that total empty aspect, but I can't know what he meant by that exactly. It's intriguing. I really like some of the ways he spoke about things, which makes sense within the seeking process as a concept that can exhaust the seeker. Yeah. But he also hinted at it himself. At some point, even the absolute must go, of course. Yeah. He said the I am sense if you regress properly, the I am sense will disappear. And the absolute is it's a way station. It's something that you do wake up to, but like this whole wild and wacky process, you wake up to certain things and then you wake up beyond them. And there's no you doing it, of course, and all that. The language is very difficult, but that's true. The analogies are things like the raft that you carry or that you need to carry you across the river. But once you're across the river, at least that river, you don't need that raft. You put the raft down and move on. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yes. Thank you very much. I made a lot of comments on your comments, but I appreciated your insights, and you obviously have a lot of clarity. This one is Alexander. It says, I had my unbound consciousness awakening just over 2 years ago, and for 3 days, I was unable to even say or think the word I. I would at first be stunned when and then start laughing when trying to say the word. That's funny. People tried to get me to see I am, but for me, it never made sense. That's probably how it would have been for me. Like I wasn't around I am teachings at all, so it didn't cross my mind. I don't think it wasn't self-inquiry that woke me up, but the experience of I wouldn't have labeled it for sure. I wouldn't have called it pure being or anything or pure consciousness or anything. It was just full on. It's just oceanic. Yeah. So, but I certainly wouldn't have said, oh, this is I am. That wouldn't have made sense to me. Maybe if I was preconditioned for it through the type of interactions I'd had with people who were pointing, I don't know though. Can't know that. Yeah. And it says, the rest of the comment says, and I am not yet at anatta. That's not what this is. I agree. Simply agreeing that this first awakening doesn't feel like I am to a lot is maybe neurodivergent. Yeah, I think that may be the case, as I said in the video. Rachel says, interesting. I didn't understand I am. Not that I've looked into many meditations or texts about that. Yeah. The same with me. It was like, don't know. My sense of self is so strong. My ego is so strong. My cravings are so strong. It was fine when I was young, but now I'm severely depressed. I don't know how to move past it. Well, I would start. It depends what you want to do. Do you want to do emotion work? You may want to do emotion and shadow work. Maybe you need to do trauma work. I don't know. But if we're talking about insight, which I am here, what I'm inclined to tell you, if you're interested in this kind of inquiry, is when you say my sense of self is so strong, my ego is so strong, my cravings are so strong. I believe that this is your experience. I mean, I believe that what you're saying feels very real to you. Like I feel conviction here in what you're saying, and I can see how that could be distressing for sure. But I'm curious, like when you say my sense of self is so strong, what are you referencing? What do you mean by that? But when I ask the question, I don't want word explanations. I don't want like, oh, well, here's I do this and then I think that and, like more thoughts to explain it. I'm suggesting that you turn inward and go, why do I think that? Myself is so strong. Where is it? It's like if I said, my friend Steve over here is so strong. And you asked me like, what do you mean? I'm like, Steve right here. Like he's right here. Look, this is Steve. And I would show you Steve. Do that with yourself. Like, where are you looking for that self of the self and saying it's strong? And your ego, where are you looking for your ego and saying that thing is strong? Maybe you're just believing a thought that says that. That's the key to a lot of this, is really seeing the difference between a thought and reality. That is the whole first awakening, is seeing the difference between thought and reality ultimately. But to the degree we're identified with thoughts, it comes with a shift in identity. Cool. Good luck. But if you want my approach through my channel, start with the Basics of Awakening playlist, go to the Awakening Approaches playlist, work through those things, find something that feels resonant with you, that can get you out of that cycle of thoughts and beliefs about yourself, that really starts to dig in, taking the backward step, whatever process works for you. I have hundreds of them. Find one, work with it, and just go inward, really take it inward, and trust that you can go beyond this room of the mind that feels like such a prison. Because I remember it, and it was miserable. This is Pignut. It says, hey, Angelo, you often point very directly to awakening in the here and now, and I find that style of pointing incredibly powerful. Do you think there is an optimal mood, mindset, or state that makes it more likely for the pointing to really land? Well, I do. But it's not, I don't think it's going to be the kind of answer you're looking for. That is, it's usually when people are really in despair. Like this person up here. It's like when they say my sense of self is strong, my ego is strong, my cravings are strong. It's like I can feel this frustration, the depression. That's, if that person is really sort of ready to turn inward and just be done with this and find something, not seek something, but find something, they're in a really good place. But I don't want to, I can't confirm that because it's just a comment. I don't know this person. So I'm sympathetic to these kinds of comments. But the true answer is what I see work the best is when people are in despair, or not just despair, but despair and a kind of surrender. But not that you choose to surrender. I mean, like, you're kind of checkmated. When you're kind of checkmated by life. I don't mean totally non-functional. I don't mean you have to be not be able to get out of bed and like losing function and, you know, severe alcoholism or something. I don't mean that. I mean, life checkmates you in the sense that you're doing the right things. You're putting out the effort. You're working hard at, you know, being as good a person as you can. You're putting your effort into relationships. You're doing the things, and yet there's a strong sense of unsatisfactoriness still. That's the kind of checkmate that life puts you in. It's Job from the Bible, where God just said, took this away, took that away, took the family, took the farm, took the whatever, I don't know, his tractor, whatever they took. And I remember being a kid hearing about Job and just being like, that's so depressing. What a horrible thing. Now I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that is about. That's life taking away your exit strategies from looking at the major fundamental central issue. The exit strategies are distractions, right? So I don't necessarily wish those tragedies on people, and yet those are the times I see people wake up most. Yeah, that's the answer in my experience. So, yeah. This one's from Suza. It says, "We made this language for relative learning. We shouldn't avoid it." Okay. This one's from Fiamith. "There's usually resonance with most of your videos, but this one is confusing for some reason. So I'd like more on the topic. The mind seems to be making this distinction between spirituality, which allows for and speaks to the I, and non-duality, which says it is not there. Even though I noticed a while ago, it's the same message in some sense. When you give instructions to feel or do anything, who are you talking to actually? You don't have to know the answer to that question. That's a trick of your mind, saying it's essentially not a question. It's a statement your mind is making, saying, well, if I don't know who is doing the inquiry, then I can't do the inquiry. It's not true. You can certainly do the inquiry. You don't have to know who you are, because you never really do know who you are. Is that helpful? You're not actually talking to me, aren't you? Worse than that, there's not even a you talking. This gap. This is what happens when you start to intellectualize. This person is intellectualizing no self. That's one of the major drawbacks with the Neo-Advaita message, is it turns into an intellectual process. When anatta, or the no self realization, is clear, and I've seen it in many people now. When it's clear, these kinds of questions don't come up. You don't walk around going, well, who's going to do that? Who's going to do this? The answer is obvious. The answer is so obvious. And it's not as simple as there's no one. That's not the answer. Buddha very specifically said that's not the answer. So, but I do want to back up and say, non-duality, which says I is not there. Non-duality, the non-dual insight itself, the realization of non-dual, doesn't feel like there's no I. It's just that there's no separate I. So it's like I doesn't make so much sense anymore, right? An example might be, let me give a more mundane example. It's like if you see a little turtle and you're like, oh, that's a turtle. And then someone says, but look closer, and they squish it, and it's clay. It's not an actual turtle, it's a clay turtle, but you thought it was a turtle. And now that clay is like forming into the turtle and something else. Well, it never loses its essence. It doesn't stop being what it was, but it just wasn't the label you gave it. And it wasn't as fixed as you thought it was. It's something like that. That's the better way of saying it than you come to a conclusion that there's no I. Certainly with the sixth fetter, certainly with the subject-object construct, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, great question. Thank you. I think I'll do one more. This one's from Realizing You. It says, maybe related, question mark. Angelo, there is something very noticeable in my visual field, whether my eyes are open or closed. I like it. I was reactive, stepped away, then shikantaza. During the rest, the visual field seems to almost start blinking in a way. The more I go into this place. Cool. Not really concerning, more a curiosity. Do you recall any weirdness, glitches in the visual realm as anatta showed you what it really was? Yes, all the time. It's here right now. The visual field is not what you think it is. It's not a solid world. So, it's very, very normal. And if you're interested, you can check out the playlist I have called Fetter 6 or the playlist called Fetter 7 or even Fetter 8. Yeah. Anatta is the final filter dropping away, essentially. But the perceptual filters of dimension, space, separation, form, those are the ones that start making things look really different, like see-through, non-existent, formless. Pretty cool. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate your comments. I read most or all of them. I answer the ones I can. And I do appreciate you all. I tend to answer the member level channel members or higher at preferentially on the comments as a perk, but I do read other comments and I do answer other comments. So thank you all, and we will see you soon.